Hi, my name is Peter Fitch, and I have a BA in Environmental Studies. Today, we are speaking with Kevin Krasnow, who is a PhD candidate at the UC Berkeley Fire Science Lab.
Hello, my name is Kevin Krasnow, and I am a PhD candidate here at UC Berkeley, working in the Fire Science Lab. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the research that we're doing here in the lab that focuses on fire ecology, fire history, and current forest management. And we're going to focus on sustainable forest management, talking about how maybe our past experiences with forests in California haven't been as sustainable as they can be in the future. I still remember the Yellowstone fires in 1988, huge fires in Yellowstone, and everyone thought that it was going to be this huge, devastating disaster, and at the time that's what was said on the news and public perception. And then that's a big turning point in American fire science because it wasn't a big disaster. Those forests are regenerating quite well, and they were adapted for those types of fires. So it was a big learning on our part that our vision of fire as a destructive, bad force was actually caught up in a lot of our cultural history, and wasn't necessarily true from an ecological perspective. But to understand how fire interacted with those forests in the past, and then understand what has happened since basically European American settlement and current forest management, to understand where we are now, and then what we're trying to understand is how the forest is going to potentially change in the future, and climate change is a big part of that. And climate and fire certainly interact. They have relationships that are clearly statistically shown, and try to predict how to maintain and manage forests sustainably in the future. Policy is a really interesting thing in forestry in the U.S. The Forest Service manages our national forests. The Park Service manages the national parks. BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, also manages large tracts of forested land. And so a lot of the policy is federal policy. And then there are state forests as well, private landowners that own timber production land. The laws are implemented by the state. So you have a lot of different governing bodies and competing interests as well. So what we're trying to provide is the science and the understanding of historic conditions, current conditions, and projections for the future, implementing those into policy, and then actually on the ground management is a whole nother step. How is an increase of 2 degrees Celsius, longer fire seasons, more extreme drought going to affect forest fires? Most of the predictions are that there are going to be more extreme events and that fires may become more frequent. We kind of work from the ground up, and we try to integrate a lot of different spatial components. So at the lowest component is at the individual tree. So we go out and we actually measure a lot of individual trees. Once we zoom back a level, some of our other data tools that we use are satellites. So satellites and even airplane flown imagery. So after each wildfire in the U.S., the USGS and U.S. Forest Service have a collaborative operation where they map the fire severity. So what they do is they take an image that was taken prior to the fire, and they compare that to an image that was taken after the fire from satellites, and they basically do some image analysis to see how much it was changed in kind of greenness, how much the vegetation has been burned, and then they can create a fire severity map.
So this tree here, you can see, was growing just fine until this year, probably it was 20 or so years old, and a fire came, and the tree was only this big at the time. The fire came and burned about half of its circumference. The other half survived and made another ring the next year, but this side, the cambium got killed, and what the tree had to do was slowly heal over that wound year after year after year after year after year. Probably took 10 years or so to heal around it, and then what happened is another fire came and burned it again and burned it back to here, and then it had to heal, heal, heal. And each of these little checks, each of these lines we see here is this tree being injured by a fire. And what I want to find out is how frequent were fires usually on the landscape, what was the fire return interval, and what were the spatial components of fires. Most recent year, so this is the year that I cut the tree, was the ring here, and then you can go back in time and you can see that fire here, fire here, fire here, fire here, another one here, 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 and here. If we look at the intervals, the average interval or number of rings between fires here is probably 5 to 20 years. This is 80 to 100 years here. So that was the last fire that this tree experienced, but it was adapted to experiencing fire every 5 to 20 years. This was the era of Native American management. They used fire as a tool. This is the modern era of fire suppression, and we can see fire, 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 and then a long distance without a fire. All of these pieces of wood are telling the same story. The fire occurrence now is less than it used to be.
My focus is to continue doing research on forest ecology so we can understand how forest ecosystems are working better in fire ecology. Ideally that research is based in science that can help inform human management of ecosystems or human coexistence with other species. In terms of the scientific challenges, I think one of the big ones is accurately modeling fire spread. That's an active area of research for this lab, and I've done some work on fire modeling in Colorado for my master's degree, and there are some really great models that can predict fire spread and fire behavior, but we're searching for a more physically based model that actually incorporates fire physics. The intrinsic presence of those forests is tremendously important for the vitality of life that's there, but certainly even life here, like our water and our air, in a lot of ways depend on forests. The question now is, if a huge fire burns a swath of forest, or maybe humans cut down a big swath of forest, will it be trees that will come back, or will it convert to a shrub field or a grassland, or potentially even an area where vegetation doesn't grow as much? That's what's scary to me, is that we don't really know, and we're not guaranteed that the forest would come back. So if there were a viable alternative or even profitable way of using the small trees, which is really, in terms of a fire perspective, what is causing a lot of the fire hazard in the forests, and also a lot of the ecological issues. Those forests didn't used to be as dense with small trees because fires were burning. So if we're not going to allow fires to burn in the environment as they used to, we're going to have an increase in biomass. If we can use that biomass sustainably and I think ultimately through a market-driven solution, then there could be more agreement and more synergy between fire reduction and ecological restoration and litigation by environment.